My wife abandoned me while I was tending to my dying father, yet when he bequeathed me a fortune in his will. My wife abandoned me while I was tending to my dying father, yet when he bequeathed me a fortune in his will, she returned, seeking forgiveness. I am a 36-year-old man, happily married for 8 years and a proud father of 2 children. I am the sole son of my ailing father. My father has been enduring kidney issues for several years now. However, over the past 2 to 3 years, his condition has deteriorated, requiring him to undergo dialysis twice a week. In the past, he managed to commute independently, but throughout the last year, he frequently requested my company. He is becoming increasingly frail with each passing day. I have established a routine for myself to take my father for dialysis each time. I cannot bear the thought of leaving him by himself in this state. He needs to attend dialysis twice a week, so I have scheduled it for Saturday and Wednesday. Saturday marks my day of rest, so there's no need for worry. On Wednesday, I received approval from my boss to leave early, and I plan to make up for the remaining hours in the evening after I get back home from dialysis. I have dedicated a decade of my career to this company. My boss views me as a dedicated and trustworthy employee, so giving this special permission was an easy decision for him. Nonetheless, the issue lay within my household with my wife, Bianca, 34F. Upon learning that I would be accompanying my dad for dialysis twice a week, she became quite upset. She had a distaste for my occasional outings with him, yet she never voiced her discontent directly. Having embraced the responsibility with care, she found herself unable to hold back. She said there was no point in wasting my time on my father because no matter what I did, he was never going to be impressed by me. Allow me to provide some context for this. My father ran a merchandising business. He was fairly prosperous and had amassed a respectable fortune. He hoped I would assume control of his business, yet my heart was set on a different path. I aimed to delve into the realm of technology. My passion for coding and software creation drove me to pursue a software degree, even when my dad suggested I explore business or management courses after school. He remained agreeable to that until I expressed my readiness to join his company. Upon finishing my graduation, I embarked on a journey with a prestigious tech firm. Dad felt disappointed that I was not continuing his legacy and instead was employed by someone else. He persistently invited me to become part of his business, while I continuously delayed my response. Following my marriage, my father inquired one last time if I wished to join, and I declined. Dad erupted in anger, declaring that he would donate all his wealth to charity, leaving me with nothing. I remained steadfast in my choice. At that age, I was indeed earning quite well. At 29, I acquired both a car and my own house. I felt a strong sense of assurance that I could carve out a fulfilling life for myself, independent of his riches. I expressed to him that I was capable of creating my own wealth without relying on his financial support. From that moment on, our relationship took a turn for the worse. 5 years ago, my mother left us, succumbing to a cardiac arrest. It was heartbreaking for my father. I left home at the age of 17 to pursue my college education. Subsequently, I secured employment and began my journey of independent living. Dad's sole companion was Mom. Her loss was the most heartbreaking experience he could endure. That was the moment our connection was revitalized. I began to visit him frequently and would bring my kids along to play with him. Ultimately, he relinquished control of his company, entrusting its management to a trust. Bianca, my wife, always maintained a certain distance from my parents. Before my mother arrived, Bianca would often steer clear of visiting my parents, claiming that my mother was overly inquisitive about our lives and that they didn't see eye to eye. Upon my father's declaration to exclude me from his will, Bianca began to openly condemn my parents, labeling them as cruel and wicked. I firmly urged her to keep her distance from my relationship with my parents. However, she consistently intervened, asserting that it was an issue that would impact our future, particularly that of our children. I reassured her that both our future and that of our children are safe, regardless of Dad's financial status. However, she was unwilling to grasp that concept. Now, regarding the present circumstances, Bianca made quite a scene upon discovering that I would be joining Dad for dialysis sessions twice a week. At first, I attempted to convey to her that my father had no one else but me. He lost his parents a long time ago. Even with an older brother, he resides on the opposite side of the city and seldom pays a visit to Dad. Since Mom's passing, Dad has been feeling quite isolated. In this state, I cannot forsake him. Yet my wife remains unwilling to grasp this. Recently, she had turned my life into a constant struggle. Each Saturday, she devises a variety of plans. Whether it's throwing a party at home, tackling a deep clean, enjoying an outing with the kids, or even something as mundane as picking up groceries. I explained to her that she has the freedom to plan whatever she desires on Sundays, as my Saturdays are dedicated to taking Dad for dialysis. Yet, she forges ahead with her plans and later chastises me for my tardiness or absence. I hurried to my dad to pick him up and then drove him to the dialysis center. Once it was over, I let him go and hurried back to her biting remarks and outbursts. "It's more than just Saturday." She repeats this for Wednesday evening. I assured my boss that I would make up for the outstanding work later in the evening or at night after I got back from dialysis. Yet, she consistently devised a scheme to unsettle me. Every Wednesday evening, she would venture out, whether to reconnect with family, catch up with old friends, or join some spontaneous gathering, while I took on the responsibility of the children. I found myself balancing my professional responsibilities, preparing meals for the kids, and tending to the needs of the youngest, all while striving to finish my outstanding tasks at work. It followed a whirlwind of a day at the office and the dialysis center. I understand it's becoming lengthy, but this truly reflects the depth of my suffering. On numerous occasions, my father proposed that I allow him to visit the center with a nurse, noting how often he observes me in a rush, glancing anxiously at my watch. Once I drop him off, I don't hesitate for a moment and hurry back. As I make my way to pick him up, I remind him to be prepared and step outside before I get there. Dad is supported by a dedicated full-time nurse and a caretaker who attend to his needs. Yet, I can't shake the guilt of not dedicating time to him. The journey from his home to the center takes about 30 minutes. In the past, I found great pleasure in conversing with him during those drives, reminiscing about the cherished memories of our childhood. However, with Bianca's outbursts becoming more frequent, my main focus is on hurrying back home. Often, I find myself racing through traffic, navigating shortcut lanes, and weaving past other vehicles to minimize my travel time. This is the sole opportunity I have to be with Dad, and I don't want to jeopardize it or interrupt it by requesting he accompany the nurse. I also bear certain duties in my role as a son. I can no longer tolerate this woman. Update 1. It only seems to be getting worse with each passing day. My wife is doing everything possible to convince me not to visit my father. She argues that it is a deal that has slipped away. My father had taken the step to exclude me from his will, and had chosen to donate his wealth to charity, rendering any further investment of time and energy in him futile. I struggle to comprehend her. Is everything we do solely for the sake of profit and loss? What happens when someone's parents lack wealth or are struggling financially? Do their children leave them behind due to a perceived lack of value? After enduring her outbursts for countless months, I ultimately informed her that she would not be receiving any inheritance from her parents. What compels her to pay them a visit from time to time? Oh my God! She completely flipped out at this and said, "My parents did a lot more than your greedy father. They stood by me in all my endeavors. They differ from your father, who turned his back on you for choosing not to follow in his footsteps. My father would never have treated me that way. So please, do not even think about comparing my parents to yours." It happened more than once. This kind of discussion has become a regular occurrence in my home, typically happening every Wednesday and Saturday after I come back from dialysis. It is becoming increasingly severe and unpleasant with each passing moment. In the past, she would confront me by herself. At this moment, I observe her raising her voice and expressing her frustration towards me in the presence of the children. I have witnessed her speaking poorly about my father in front of my children, attempting to turn them against both him and me. I listened and stepped in, which once more resulted in a heated confrontation between us. Bianca's struggle has turned into a familiar pattern for me. On the days when she refrains from fighting, there's an undeniable void, yet it seems to fuel her aggression the following day. I find myself on the brink of surrendering my hopes for her. I choose not to respond to her. Instead, I treat her as though she is invisible to me. What other steps can I take? I cannot forsake my father merely to satisfy her desires. I am indifferent to the fact that he has removed me from his will. He acted based on my own choice. I declined to become a part of his organization. He had no choice but to relinquish his hard-earned business to the trust. It surely must have been incredibly discouraging for him. That company was like a child to my dad, and he had to pass it on to someone else. He was completely justified in disowning me, as I had caused him pain. I occasionally sense that karma is catching up with me due to the pain I caused my dad. Conversely, Dad is growing more frail. He struggles to walk independently. He requires assistance to help him get into the car. In an effort to be more efficient, I would often invite him to step outside so I could drop him off right at the house. However, at this point, I find myself indifferent to the notion of tardiness. I enter the room, guiding him gently to the car before tucking him into bed, ensuring he finds his calm and drifts off peacefully. He is experiencing shortness of breath, so I ensure to walk at a pace that suits him best. Additionally, when I'm behind the wheel, I make sure to drive with caution to avoid speeding and elevating his heart rate. I'm indifferent to arriving home late, as hurrying there hasn't proven beneficial either. If I must confront that wicked woman, I might as well ensure Dad's happiness in the process. My laid-back approach has escalated the situation, and yesterday, Bianca mentioned that I must make a choice between them. It could be either my dad or her. I attempted to convey to her that our father would not be with us indefinitely, given his current state. It seemed unlikely that he would pull through. After a lengthy pause, she returned with a terse response. In that case, you must choose wisely. A person destined to remain by your side for eternity or one whose time is fleeting. This was incredibly thoughtless. I said to her, you know what? I'd rather stand by my dad than be with someone as wicked and self-centered towards a dying man as you are. With determination, she gathered her belongings and set off on her journey. I didn't even intervene. She required a moment to gather her thoughts, and I too sought some distance from her. In her absence, I'm managing the house, my children, Dad, and my work, yet I feel an unexpected sense of relief and relaxation. Her absence brings me a sense of calm. Just the day before yesterday, she sent me the divorce papers. I had a sense it might happen, yet I didn't foresee it arriving quite this quickly. Initially, I was taken aback, yet beneath the surface, a sense of happiness and relief washed over me. I refrained from calling her. I merely signed the papers and returned them to her. Unexpectedly, she chose not to pursue custody of the children. I was primarily concerned about that one clause, yet it was evident she had no interest in them. Upon receiving the paper, she called me back, her voice raised in frustration, questioning how I could simply sign it and imploring me for understanding. Isn't that amusing? Her mother seized the phone and exclaimed that I ought to have behaved like a man, attempting to reconcile his wife back into the marriage rather than merely signing the papers. It was absolutely hilarious. What would motivate me to take that action? She expressed her desire for a divorce, and I acquiesced. I found it to be quite beneficial for myself. I removed her from the situation effortlessly. I playfully mocked her for having left her children behind, suggesting she didn't care for them at all. She mentioned that I could keep everything I had, including my 2 children. She had no desire for any of it. Her mother expressed that Bianca was still quite young and preferred not to carry the burden of children on her shoulders. I expressed that it's perfectly all right with me. Having my kids around brings me a sense of relief, without a doubt. However, I can't shake off the worry for my children, especially the younger one, who really misses their mom when I'm at the office. Managing all the responsibility alone is quite challenging, yet I remain hopeful that I will navigate through it successfully. This update too will be brief. I moved to my father's house with my kids. This is an excellent decision, and I want to express my gratitude to everyone for the wonderful suggestion. It turned out well. Relocating with my father proved beneficial for everyone involved. My children are now under the care of their father. They had their grandpa to play with, and Dad had a full-time caregiver who was prepared to look after my children for a raise. So, why not? Looking for someone to care for my children while my dad supervises. Sounds like the perfect arrangement, doesn't it? Seeing my dad play and laugh with my children fills me with joy, as they delight in their time with their grandpa. Bianca was caught off guard by this turn of events. Her intention seemed to be to turn my life into a struggle through the act of divorce. She believed I wouldn't manage to balance all the responsibilities at once. Caring for the children, my father, the household, and my job. However, everything is arranged flawlessly. I'm certainly enjoying the final chuckle. The divorce turned out to be the best decision. Haha. Update 3 brings somber news. My father left us peacefully in his sleep last week. He drifted off to sleep, filled with joy and satisfaction after spending time with my children, and never opened his eyes again. The physician remarked that he passed away quietly. The doctor, along with his nurse and caregiver, all remarked that Dad seemed happy after I began living with him. And it truly extended his lifespan by these many months. He was teetering on the brink of surrender before I arrived. It is profoundly heartbreaking to lose a sole parent, yet I find solace in the fact that he was able to enjoy the final months of his life in happiness. My children are deeply saddened by his loss. However, Father has instilled strong principles in them. It is said that Grandpa imparted lessons on embracing reality and progressing forward. Life continues on, indifferent to anyone's circumstances. It fills me with immense pride to receive such positive feedback from them. In this moment of despair, they truly serve as my source of strength. However, there is one more startling revelation that emerged following my father's passing. The lawyer representing my father contacted me, requesting that I visit his office to discuss the details of my father's will. I mentioned that it wasn't necessary, as Dad had already informed me he had allocated all his wealth to the trust. I'm perfectly fine with that, and he can go ahead with the paperwork to transfer everything to them. I inquired whether I needed to leave my father's house, as I suspected it might have been donated to the charity trust as well. He chuckled at my expense and invited me to simply come over. Upon my arrival, I discovered that the trust members were already in attendance. The attorney had reached out to them too. As the lawyer began to read the will, tears streamed down my face. My father has indeed named me as his heir. Everything he built, his home, his fortune, was all for me. I inquired with the lawyer whether this change had been implemented recently. I believed he implemented this change once I began looking after him. The lawyer smiled and remarked, "I have always been his heir, and the will was never changed." I was overwhelmed with tears, feeling the deep ache of knowing my dad never left me behind. Perhaps he issued that threat of disowning me to ensure I would carry on his business and uphold his legacy. As I continued to weep, my father's attorney offered me comfort. It pains me deeply to know that I have caused my dad suffering throughout his life, yet he has always shown me love and care. The lawyer mentioned that my father was genuinely proud of my determination to follow my passion despite his influence and that he respected my willingness to forego our family's wealth in pursuit of what truly makes me happy. My father felt an immense sense of pride in my accomplishments. The attorney stated that I hold the authority to make decisions for the business. If I choose to, I can reclaim the company from the trust and manage it on my own. I am considering pursuing that idea. I pursued my desires without restraint. My father offered his support in subtle ways. Now, it was my turn to repay him. I'm considering reclaiming it from the trust and elevating it to the heights my dad envisioned for his business. Upon returning home, I shared with my children the details of their grandpa's will. He has allocated a portion of his wealth to my children once they reach the age of 18. Today, we visited his grave with flowers in hand and took a moment to embrace the tranquility around us. This is an incredibly poignant time for me. Update 40. Upon spotting the sugar candy, the ants hurried back with great enthusiasm. A month after my father's passing, I began to assume control of his business and engage in various community service activities. Initially, I decided to leave my job and assume control of the business. I rented out my house since my children and I chose to move into my parents' home. This house evokes a deep sense of connection to their grandpa. This house holds my childhood memories, and I find it difficult to part with it. Upon receiving the news of my inheritance of my father's $1 million fortune, my home became a hub of activity, filled with long-lost relatives, friends, and neighbors. However, the most unexpected visitor was my ex-wife, Bianca, accompanied by her parents. They stepped into the house, tears streaming down their faces, expressing their sorrow over not knowing about my father's passing. Had they been aware, they would have surely come to the funeral. Her parents continued to express nothing but praise for my dad. Bianca embraced the children, tears streaming down her face as she expressed her deep longing for them. I inquired whether she missed them dearly and why she hadn't made the effort to visit in the past 7 to 8 months. She mentioned that she visited our house, but it was secured. What nonsense! I asked. Weren't you concerned about your children when you noticed the house was locked? Wasn't it important for you to reach out and see if the kids were okay? She remained silent. Her parents suggested moving on from everything that had occurred in the past. With my father gone, the children would find themselves alone in the house during my work hours. They require a nurturing presence. It was indeed preferable for us to find common ground. I found their suggestion utterly amusing. It was when she entrusted them to me that the children needed her the most. The children have become accustomed to her absence now. I have no desire to have her re-enter my life. She began to weep. Her parents abandoned us to our own devices. She grasped my hands tightly and implored me for a chance to make amends. She expressed her love for me and her longing to be with the children. I chuckled and remarked, "You know, it's clear that your affection isn't for me but for the fortune my father bequeathed. You and your avaricious parents have come knocking at my door solely to siphon off my wealth." I stand by my choice of words regarding her parents, as they accurately reflect the truth of the situation. She referred to my dad as selfish and unkind during our separation. I was determined that this woman would not receive a single cent of my father's hard-earned money. She was hurt by my comments about her parents. She expressed that up until this moment, her pleas were driven by love for me, but now she would claim what is rightfully hers. She chose not to request any alimony in the divorce. However, she requires a portion of my fortune, or rather, a portion of my father's fortune. I informed her that she had the freedom to pursue any path she desired. I will bring her down without spending a dime. She mistreated me and walked away. I had a conversation with my lawyer regarding this possibility. He remarked that her prospects were minimal. A year prior to receiving the inheritance, the divorce had been finalized. Moreover, the children were in my care, leaving her with no opportunity to obtain anything. However, he also urged me to exercise caution regarding her time with the children. She had the ability to control them and seek custody, later leveraging that to request financial support for their upkeep and everything associated with it. I am incredibly grateful to him for this advice. I will oversee their meeting. I've been dedicating a significant amount of time to the kids lately, guiding them through their grief so they don't feel the need to seek emotional support from their mother. I've taken over my dad's company, which allows me significant freedom to prioritize my well-being and personal life. I'm organizing a trip to the Bahamas with the kids. Absolutely? Why not? This extravagant getaway is well deserved for them. No, it's about exceeding the limits of my father's fortune. I might have been able to manage it, but earlier, I was caught up with work and looking after Dad. Now that I have the opportunity, I wish to bring them out. From Bianca's perspective, she hasn't reached out to me since their previous visit. It seems she is preoccupied with visiting every lawyer's office to initiate a lawsuit against me.